I'm back in Grasmere to do a wonderful walk that has the bonus of a bit of hidden history. And there are a few questions to be answered on the way, such as why is this path through these woods so wide? Why has someone built a garden pond halfway up? And why are there pipes stuck into the rock? And then there is the strange tale of the stout Manchester gentleman who got lost on Helvellyn in the name of turning on a fountain in Albert Square. All will be revealed in this super walk up to Alcock Tarn. I'm starting from the church in Grasmere, close to Wordsworth's grave, and heading out towards his old house at Dove Cottage. Once there, we head up the old road towards White Moss Common, before turning left to follow the path up to Brackenfell Woods. And before long, there's a seat to enable us to enjoy the view across the valley.
One of the things that you notice when you look out across the valley is the large houses built on the other side of the lake, large villas. There's quite a lot of those. They're actually plush villas built by wealthy industrialists from Lancashire and Manchester in the 18th and 19th century. They were an escape for them from the polluted air of the overcrowded cities. Note that it was their factories that created their wealth and also caused the overcrowding and pollution in the first place.
Just after the seat, we turn left towards Alcock Tarn. The path through the woods follows the line of an old packhorse route, but that's not the reason it's so wide. Back in the 19th century, if you were wealthy enough to build a villa overlooking the lake, you'd also build a landscape garden to go with it. This had little to do with being green-fingered or even impressing the neighbours. It was about power and influence.
What we're walking through, it's a nice piece of woodland owned and managed by the National Trust. But if we could turn back the clock, what we would see is an elaborately landscaped woodland garden with artificial streams and waterfalls and crisscrossed by a network of paths.
It featured shrubs and trees carefully planted so as to frame the view of the fells beyond.
This wide track allowed the owners to convey their guests to the top of the garden via carriage. Then their guests could nicely stroll down through the garden enjoying all the features as they went.
It was very much the status symbol of its day. Most of the villas built in the lakes during that period had extensive gardens, and owners tried to outdo each other with ever more inventive features such as tunnels, grottos and hidden summer houses. These are the most visible remains of the old woodland garden, an old iron water pipe set into the path,
And this ornamental pond, which as you can see comes with a view of its own. Old iron pipes like these laid into the ground are not actually that uncommon on the lower fells of the Lake District. When the plush villas were built, there was no such thing as mains water. So what they used to do was lay a pipe up to a convenient tarn or a stream. When mains water finally arrived, they just abandoned the pipes, and some of them are still here.
Once we leave the woodland behind, we lose the artificial landscape, and the real beauty of this walk is revealed in these stunning vistas up and down the valley. No artificial water features here, we've got the real thing. This gate is a bit deceptive. The tarn is still some way away. Good view of Sow Milk Gill across the valley there. Right, it's time to find myself a comfortable seat, because I've got a bit of a confession to make.
This is Grey Crag, which is a wonderful viewpoint in its own right. Windermere, Grasmere, all the way up Easdale, superb. Set into this rock is a pipe, which is actually a pole for the flag marker for the Grasmere Fell Guides race. But over the years I've found that explanation to be a little bit boring, so I've kind of perpetuated the myth that it's actually part of the old waterworks and the pipework running down the fell. I've also perpetuated the idea that when times of drought were around, then the owner of the house down below would send his servants up here with silver jugs, and they would run up to the tarn, fill their silver jugs, come along and pour the water down the pipe in order to keep the whole waterfalls and the ponds and everything in the streams moving and flowing. Well, it's absolute nonsense. It's a lot more fun than the real explanation of why it's here, and one or two people haven't believed me.
Moving swiftly on, just beyond that gap in the wall is our destination. Allcock Tarn, pretty as a picture. A beautiful natural mountain tarn, except it's not. Like the woodland garden down below, it's man-made.
It used to be called Buttercrags Tarn. Buttercrags are just over there. And Mr. Allcock owned it, and he built this dam along this end and turned it into a trout fishery. He then had no end of difficulty preventing his trout from being pilfered by the local heron population. It must have had a field day. After all, it's a bit like somebody opening up a free restaurant next door to where you live and serving your favourite food every day.
No herons today, but there's masses of minnows and tadpoles. A pair of ducks, although there's no sign of any ducklings, and literally thousands of very tiny frogs. After a very pleasant hour spent relaxing by the tarn, it's time to set off back. I'm not returning the same way. Instead, I'm heading down the fell side towards Greenhead Gill. It's pretty steep down this way, but it's also very, very scenic. That construction down there is part of the Thirlmere Aqueduct, the longest gravity-fed aqueduct in the country.
The water leaves Thirlmere, goes under a tunnel under Dunmail Raise, and then follows the contours of the hillside, dropping at a rate of 20 inches for every mile. Goes along at a brisk walking pace of 4 miles an hour. Takes just over a day to make the 95 miles to Manchester, and there are no pumps involved whatsoever. It's entirely by gravity. It's a wonderful feat of engineering. This rubble on the top of the aqueduct shows the impact of the December storms. There's rubble all over the top of here to a depth of about 6 inches to a foot. It's actually over the gate. There's a large rock down there in behind the iron gate. The amount of water that must have come down that fell side on December the 5th, 2015 is amazing, and it's testament to how well this was built that it wasn't washed away like so many bridges around the county where it's still standing, it's still carrying the water. It's wonderful.
Thirlmere was not the original lake of choice of the Manchester Waterworks Committee. They had planned to use Ullswater. So it was that 10 portly city gentlemen who had barely experienced the rigours of a full day's physical exertion arrived by the shores of Ullswater in 1875. It didn't take them long to work out that their plan simply wasn't feasible. So they decided to take a look at Thirlmere instead.
That would have been a good idea had it not been for the fact that they decided that the quickest way to get from Ullswater to Thirlmere was to go straight over Helvellyn. They They got lost. They endured the rigours of Striding Edge, got stuck in a peat bog. 10 hours later they arrived bedraggled at Thirlmere in the dead of night and went into an inn. It's a miracle really that they all survived. Their brand of optimism was typified by the chief engineer Sir John Bateman, who reassured them that building a tunnel under Dunmail Raise and then a 94-mile long aqueduct that would go downhill all the way without the need for any pumps through the Lake District and on down through Lancashire would present absolutely no engineering difficulties whatsoever. With the mines made up, they decided to buy the land around Thirlmere, but they reckoned without Thomas Leeds, who was Lord of the Manor of Legberfleet, an opponent of the scheme. Luckily, when he died, his son George had emigrated to Australia. He couldn't really care less about his ancestral home, and so they were able to buy the land and go ahead with the scheme. Despite local opposition, the scheme went ahead, and on the 12th of October 1894, Sir John Bateman turned the wheel at Thirlmere Reservoir to allow water into the aqueduct for the first time. And then he promptly rushed back to Manchester so that he could watch the same water coming out at the other end the next day.
A temporary fountain was erected in Albert Square, and the large crowd cheered when the tap was turned on and the water flowed, and it's been flowing day and night ever since. From the bottom of Greenhead Gill, it's a nice stroll back to the main road, then across the fields to Grasmere. And as is fitting for a walk that has been about the movement of water, we're going to finish not by road, but with a walk along the riverbank back to the churchyard via the Daffodil Garden. A relaxing way to end a lovely day.